So today we're going to share a story that unfolded in South Korea, one that starts with someone who, well, really captured the nation's heart.
Yeah, he was this figure who got a lot of fame, a lot of sympathy, because he was very publicly fighting this really rare, tough illness.
Right. And his life, the way it was shown to everyone, it looked so inspiring. Like, here's this loving dad facing just incredible hardship.
But behind that image, the one everyone admired, there was this just shocking, dark truth. Something that only really blew up after a young girl disappeared.
Our source material digs into that whole unraveling, showing just how many layers of, deception were involved.
Yeah, it's quite the story.
And what we want to do today is walk you through it, explore that chilling reality hidden behind someone the public, trusted and really supported, and look at the devastating impact of what he did.
Okay, so let's start right there with the disappearance itself.
Okay, yeah. Let's go back to September 30th, 2017. There's a 15-year-old girl, we'll call her Kim, like in the source.
So, right.
She decides to visit a friend, apparently someone she hadn't seen for about a year. She heads over to their apartment. Just a normal visit, you'd think.
But then the hours tick by. Evening turns into night, and Kim doesn't come home.
And her parents can't reach her?
No, can't get her on the phone. Their worry starts building, turning into real concern. Serious concern.
So they do the right thing. They call the police, report her missing.
They do. And initially the advice was, wait 24 hours, which is pretty standard procedure sometimes.
Okay.
But the police did start keeping an eye on things.
And after that 24 hours?
Yep. October 1st, 2017. That waiting period's up, and boom, the police launch a full investigation. They start interviewing the family, talking to anyone who might have seen her or known her plans.
Okay, so how did they try to, piece together her movements, where she might have gone?
Well, the key was surveillance footage. South Korea has a lot of CCTV, so investigators started, painstakingly going through camera footage along the routes Kim might possibly have taken.
And did they find something?
They did. They found this really critical piece of footage. It showed two people, a man and a young girl, and they were struggling, really struggling, moving this big, heavy object.
An object?
Yeah, wrapped in a black bag. They were sort of heaving it into the back of a car. Looked really suspicious.
Wow. Could they tell who the people were?
Yes, they could.
Yeah.
The man was identified as Lee Young-hak, and the young girl helping him, that was his daughter, Ayeon.
Yeah, right.
And here's the connection that just changes everything. Ayeon was the friend Kim had gone to visit that day.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the timing, the heavy bag, the fact that it's the friend she went to see, that's immediate red flags. Right?
Huge red flags, absolutely. Police knew right then they had to look very closely at Lee Young-hak and his daughter. The whole thing just screamed suspicion, especially with Ayeon being Kim's friend.
So, okay, they focus on Lee and Ayeon. Where did that lead them?
It led them straight to their apartment in a place called Dabong-dong.
And when they got there?
Well, officers arrived, but they actually had to force their way in. And inside, they found both Lee and Ayeon unconscious.
Unconscious, both of them. That's unexpected.
Yeah, definitely strange. It looked like they tried to overdose on sleeping pills.
Good grief.
They were rushed for medical treatment right away.
Yeah.
And luckily, they both recovered.
That must have just intensified the police's focus. Once they were okay, conscious, did they start talking? Did Lee say anything?
Well, initially, Lee Young-hak denied everything. Said he knew nothing about Kim's disappearance, wasn't involved at all.
But the police had the video.
Exactly. They had the CCTV, they had the timeline. They knew Ayeon was Kim's friend. So when they confronted him with all that evidence, his story,
Wow.
it crumbled.
And he confessed.
He did. He admitted he'd killed Kim. And then he told the police where he'd hidden her body.
Oh, no. Where?
A remote valley. Way out in Yeongwol in Gangwon province. Pretty isolated spot.
Of course they didn't. Did they find her?
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
Police went to the exact location Lee gave them, and they found Kim's body. She was naked.
Oh, that's just awful.
The autopsy later revealed just horrific details. She'd been sexually assaulted, and a hard object had been inserted into her genitalia. So the immediate questions, who did it, where was she, they were answered fast and horrifically.
Just devastating. But hang on, you said earlier Lee Young-hak was this well-known public figure before all this happened.
Yes.
How does someone like that, someone capable of this, how did he become famous and apparently, loved across South Korea?
Yeah, this is where the story gets really, really unsettling. Because before the murder, Lee Young-hak was nationally known. But his fame wasn't like from being an actor or singer or anything.
Right.
It came from his very public battle with this incredibly rare, very difficult genetic disorder.
Okay, what was the condition called?
It's called craniofacial neurofibromatosis. Basically, it's an illness that causes tumors to grow all over the face and jaw.
Leading to, I imagine, severe disfigurement and health issues.
Oh, absolutely. It significantly distorted how he looked, his facial appearance. And it really messed with his respiratory system, too. He needed countless surgeries over his life.
Wow.
Yeah, and he had so many operations just trying to remove tumors from his jaw that eventually he was left with only one molar tooth. Just one.
And that's how he got the nickname everyone knew him by, Molar Daddy.
That's exactly it. Molar Daddy. And the really heartbreaking part, his daughter, Aeon, the one who helped him move the bag, she had the same inherited disease.
Oh my God, so it was this shared struggle, him and his daughter facing this awful illness together.
Right. And that shared experience combined with how he presented himself publicly, this super devoted dad taking care of his sick kid, it just generated enormous public sympathy.
I can see how it would.
He got a ton of media attention, appeared on TV shows, they made documentaries about him. He even put out a book called M Daddy, telling his story.
And all that attention led to people wanting to help, like financially.
Huge financial help. Significant public donations poured in. Reports mention a really substantial amount, something like 30 million Thai baht, which is a lot of money. People gave because they were moved by his story. They thought the money was going to pay for his and Aeon's medical treatments, make their difficult lives a bit better.
Which sounds like a totally understandable, compassionate reaction from the public.
It absolutely was.
Yeah.
And he did apparently use some of those donated funds to open up a restaurant, framed it as like a way to provide for their future.
Okay, so that was the public story. Molar Daddy, the suffering but resilient father, totally devoted to his sick daughter, using the public's kindness to fight their illness and just try to build a life.
That is precisely the image, the one that really connected with people, earned their trust, earned their support.
But then he gets arrested for murder. And suddenly, that carefully built image, it didn't just crack, it sounds like it completely shattered.
Oh, it shattered spectacularly. Because people who'd known Lee, or even just watched him closely after he got famous and got all that money, they started noticing things. Things that just didn't quite fit with that wholesome public persona.
Like what kind of things?
Well, his behavior reportedly changed after the big donations came in. And then these photos started leaking out. Pictures showing Lee with lots of tattoos, smoking.
Okay.
Now, the source makes a point. It's not about judging tattoos or smoking on their own. It's about how jarringly different that looked compared to the image of the pure, suffering father figure everyone thought that no, it just didn't line up.
It broke the illusion. Right.
Exactly. And remember that restaurant, the one funded partly by donations. Reports came out saying he basically neglected it, hardly ever showed up, didn't seem to manage it properly.
Okay, so maybe financial mismanagement. But were there worse things coming out?
Much worse. Really disturbing allegations. Women who had worked at his restaurant came forward. They alleged sexual harassment by Lee.
Oh my God. So not just misusing funds, but predatory behavior too.
Way beyond just funds. And then, people who knew him way back, like from his youth, they started talking too. Some claimed Lee had been trouble since middle school. And horrifyingly, that he'd even bragged back then about luring and sexually abusing elementary school girls.
So this pattern, targeting young girls,
Yeah.
it wasn't something new that just happened in 2017.
This is really crucial. They checked his criminal record, and it turned out he already had 11 counts of fraud against him before he ever became famous, before he got a single donation as Molar Daddy.
Wait, 11 counts of fraud before he was the national symbol of sympathy? That's incredible.
It's a shocking contrast, isn't it?
Yeah.
This wasn't some good guy who suddenly turned bad. There was a documented history of deceit long, long before the public persona was even created.
Wow.
You can imagine these revelations just sent shockwaves through South Korea. People felt profoundly betrayed. They'd given so much sympathy, trust, money to someone who, it turned out, had this hidden criminal past and these deeply disturbing predatory tendencies.
What a horrific betrayal of public trust and kindness. Okay, let's go back to September 30th, 2017, to Kim's murder. Now that we know more about this darker side of Lee, what did the investigation reveal about why he did it and how it actually happened?
Well, Lee eventually confessed his main motive for killing Kim was, chillingly, sexual gratification.
Just pure predation.
Yeah. And the investigation backed this up. They found his internet search history, for instance. He'd been searching online for young girls, specifically looking for ages 14 to 20, to come live with him. A clear pattern, a preference.
And he used his own daughter to get to Kim.
This part is just sickeningly manipulative. He apparently asked Aeon specifically if she had any friends who were maybe having family problems, like he was looking for someone vulnerable.
Wow.
And Aeon suggested Kim, her old classmate, the one she hadn't seen in a year. She even showed her dad a photo of Kim.
So he picked Kim based on her picture.
The source suggests Lee was drawn to Kim's appearance. He apparently noted she resembled his wife, who had died recently. So he told Aeon invite Kim over. And he planned, right from the start, to drug her food or drinks.
So this wasn't spontaneous at all. It was completely premeditated.
Totally premeditated. Kim arrives. She's given the drugged food or drink. After about maybe 3 hours, she loses consciousness.
Okay.
And at that point, Lee tells Aeon to leave the apartment, go hang out with other friends, deliberately clearing the way so he'd be alone with Kim while she was unconscious.
And that's when he assaulted her.
Yes. While she was unconscious, he sexually assaulted her. But then, tragically, Kim regained consciousness later. She realized what had happened.
Oh, no.
And she fought back. Understandably resisted, tried desperately to get away.
And he killed her to silence her, to stop her from telling anyone.
That's what he confessed to. He was afraid she'd expose him, so he strangled her with a necktie. Killed her right there.
Just horrifying. And the timing of all this lines up with that CCTV footage of them moving the bag.
It matches perfectly. Sometime between about 11:55 a.m. and 1:4 p.m. that same day, Lee put Kim's body into that black travel bag, then put it in his car. And chillingly, Aeon, who'd come home by then, actually helped him lift the heavy bag into the car.
So his daughter actively helped him dispose of the body.
Her involvement in the aftermath, yeah, it's undeniable.
Okay, and then there's this other really disturbing piece. Lee's wife. She died just a month before Kim's murder, right? And it was initially called a suicide.
Yes, exactly. Her death was first investigated and ruled a suicide. The belief was she jumped from their apartment building.
But after Lee confessed to murdering Kim...
Right, with everything coming out about his character, the brutality of Kim's murder, the police thought, hang on. They reopened his wife's case. They started seriously suspecting maybe it wasn't suicide. Maybe there was foul play, or at the very least some serious manipulation by Lee involved.
What was Lee's story about why his wife would kill herself?
Lee's explanation was that she was overwhelmed with guilt. He claimed she'd been having a secret affair for 8 years with his own stepfather.
With his stepfather? Wow.
Yeah. And he also claimed the stepfather had also committed suicide around that time, supposedly leaving a note saying the affair was consensual.
And Lee actually used his wife's death for more sympathy.
Oh, absolutely. He totally capitalized on it, gave interviews, even shared this video of himself looking completely distraught, mourning over her body, talking about how much he loved her, even with the alleged affair, just layering more onto that public image.
So what did the police find when they looked closer at the wife's death?
This is where it gets incredibly suspicious. They reviewed the CCTV from the apartment building on the night she died. And the footage showed Lee and Aeon coming downstairs about 3 minutes after his wife fell.
3 minutes. That seems like a long time if it was a sudden, unexpected fall.
Looked a very noticeable delay, yeah. And then there were the witnesses. Paramedics at the scene reported Lee acting really strangely. He refused to ride in the ambulance with his wife to the hospital. Showed very little outward emotion, apparently. No distress.
Which is just completely not what you'd expect from someone whose wife just fell from a building.
Not at all. And maybe the most crucial thing, the footage also showed Lee adjusting his wife's clothing at the scene.
Right.
And actively cleaning up bloodstains on the ground before the paramedics had even fully secured the area.
Cleaning the scene. Okay, that screams cover up.
Right. Those actions immediately raise huge suspicions that something was very, very wrong here. Way beyond just a tragic suicide.
Okay, so suspicious delays, odd behavior, tampering with the scene. But the source mentioned the most shocking find was on his laptop.
Yes. And this is maybe the most horrifying piece of the entire puzzle. On Lee's laptop, the police found videos of his wife having sex with various different men.
Wait, what? You mean?
The source clearly indicates Lee was forcing his wife into prostitution to make money, and he was filming these acts.
Oh my God, that's monstrous.
It's profoundly disturbing. And if you try to connect the dots, it makes you wonder about that whole story he told about the affair with his stepfather. Was that even true? Or was it maybe part of this wider pattern of horrific exploitation? Maybe he even set that up or used it somehow to get money out of the stepfather.
So the wife's death, even if she did jump, it might have been her only way out, an escape from the life he was forcing on her.
That becomes a very strong possibility, based on this evidence.
Yeah, no.
If she wasn't actually murdered by him, her suicide could absolutely have been a desperate act to escape this unbearable reality he'd built for her, constantly exploiting her, her body, her dignity, just for his own financial gain. It paints this picture of someone just pervasively controlling and utterly depraved.
It shows such a chilling ability to just view other people, even his own wife, as things to be used. Which brings us back to Aeon, his daughter. What was her exact role, and how did investigators see her involvement?
Well, Aeon's involvement, especially with Kim, is pretty clear. She was the one who lured her friend over. She helped move the body. She was there with her father right after her mother's death, too.
Yeah.
But the police ultimately concluded that Lee had heavily manipulated and controlled her through all of this.
Given everything else we've heard about him, that unfortunately makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. They did a psychological assessment on Aeon, and the suggestion was she was suffering from Stockholm Syndrome.
Stockholm Syndrome, where the victim bonds with their abuser.
Exactly. Where the victim develops positive feelings like a bond with their captor or abuser. They feel they have to protect them.
So her initial reaction to the police kind of fits that.
It does. Apparently, she initially lied to protect her dad.
Yeah.
Defended him fiercely. She really struggled, reportedly, to accept anything negative being said about him. She ended up being sent for psychological treatment and evaluation while she was waiting for her own trial.
Right, because they both face charges. What happened legally?
They did. Lee Young-hak went on trial for Kim's murder. On January 30th, 2018, his initial sentence was death.
Death penalty, okay. And Aeon.
Aeon, remember, she was only 15 when this happened. She was found guilty as an accomplice. Her sentence was 7 years in prison. She was eligible for parole or appeal after serving 4 years.
7 years for her role. Wow. And Lee, in court, did he show remorse?
Reports say he did express regret in court, apologized to Kim's family, was seen crying. But he also apparently tried to argue he was being treated unfairly because of his illness.
Still trying to play the sympathy card, even then?
It certainly seems like it. Anyway, he appealed the death sentence, and on September 6, 2018, it was reduced to life imprisonment.
So no longer death, but life.
Correct. He actually tried to appeal again later that year, November 29th, 2018, hoping for another reduction. But the Supreme Court shut that down and upheld the life sentence.
So he's currently serving life in prison.
That's right. Lee Young-hak is serving life. And Aeon, given her sentence and parole rules, she likely would have been released sometime around 2023.
So, looking back at this whole awful story, what's the lasting feeling or legacy in South Korea, especially given who he was before?
I think the biggest legacy is just one of profound shock and this deep, deep sense of betrayal felt by the public.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They had put so much trust, so much sympathy, so much financial support into Lee Young-hak.
Yeah.
They really saw him as this symbol of strength, you know?
Yeah.
A resilient, devoted dad overcoming terrible odds.
He was held up as an inspiration, almost.
Exactly. But the reality comes out. His actual criminal past, the fraud before the fame, the sexual predation, the harassment claims, the sickening manipulation of his own daughter, and then that utterly horrifying exploitation of his wife.
It just completely demolished that image.
It didn't just demolish it. It revealed something truly monstrous hiding underneath. And it's just this profound tragedy that Lee, who was given so much opportunity and support through public kindness, chose this path of absolute darkness, inflicting so much suffering, causing death, instead of using that help for anything good. The case blew up, became massive news, precisely because the killer was someone the whole nation thought they knew and had actively supported.
It's such a chilling example of how carefully crafted appearances can hide the most disturbing truths imaginable.
It really makes you question, doesn't it? How well can we ever really know the people around us? Even the ones whose struggles seem so visible, seem to make them so worthy of our compassion, our help.
And how maybe deep-seated depravity, when it gets an opportunity, when it gets resources, can lead to just the most unthinkable actions. It leaves you wondering what other darkness might be hiding just beneath the surface of lives that look ordinary or even inspiring.